Hogan versus Andre, Austin versus McMahon, Jerry Lawler versus statutory rape laws. Throughout the history of professional wrestling, there have been all types of memorable feuds. And it's those feuds a lot of times that stand the test of time and end up being those things that you remember the most fondly and look back on with the most warm and fuzzy feelings imaginable. And while I don't know if 2014 had one of those type of feuds for the WWE in terms of the annals of history, there's no doubt that there were still some intriguing, compelling feuds that occurred during the year. And I came to you and provided you with some nominees and asked you to vote for the 2014 WWE Feud of the Year. The nominees were Daniel Bryan versus The Authority, CM Punk versus the WWE, Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins, the WWE Universe versus the WWE Network, and then Batista versus the WWE Universe. Honestly, in terms of great on-screen feuds this year, the company was very, very lacking. Let's just call it exactly how we see it. And you might sit there and look at the options like the WWE Universe versus the WWE Network and say, well, that's just Jeff being a smartass. Yeah, kind of. But, I mean, that was one of the major feuds within WWE in 2014. The fact that the company was trying to sit there and push and promote this new way of doing business, and they have all these millions and millions of people that supposedly have this affinity for the WWE Network, and yet and still the WWE can't get to a point where they can get enough subscribers for this network to help the company break even. That's a legitimate feud, and I think it fits in this category, as does Batista versus the WWE Universe. Indeed. But I knew ultimately that the voting was going to come down to one of three options. It was going to be Daniel Bryan versus The Authority, CM Punk versus the WWE, and Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins. Now, Daniel Bryan versus The Authority, yes, it carried over from 2013, but there's no doubt that it was the feud of the year early in 2014 in my mind. Here you've got Daniel Bryan, that ultimate kind of underdog who represents so many things that the WWE is against when it comes to a top star, and you have the fans latching onto him en masse. And then you have The Authority that represents so much of the old school way of thinking and so many of the traditional, tried and true ways of the WWE. And it was kind of magic. I mean, it made for some compelling television, and by God, wouldn't we know now how badly we need that compelling television. You've got CM Punk versus the WWE, Punk walking out on the company, the back and forth between the two sides, Punk ultimately going to sign with the UFC, the WWE while selling his merch at the same point in time, trying to tell people they can't wear the merch that they're freaking trying to sell. Major feud for 2014, no question. Then Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins, that was the feud in terms of the on-screen component for the second half of 2014. I don't think anybody disputes that. There's no question about that. It had so many elements going for it, and it had two young guys that were really trying to make a name for themselves and really trying to get themselves over in massive ways, and did just that. But ultimately, who did you choose for the 2014 WWE Feud of the Year? Well, the results have been tabulated, and I assure you the results are legitimate. Your winner is Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins. I was actually surprised because I thought people were going to go more with Daniel Bryan versus The Authority because maybe you felt they had a little bit more of a satisfying payoff. Whereas Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins, you got to that point you were finally going to get that payoff, and then they kind of wussed out and went right into Wyatt versus Ambrose. And in terms of CM Punk versus WWE, I thought that might have been another option because we're still at the end of 2014, heading into 2015. Punk hasn't wrestled for the WWE since the Royal Rumble back in January of 2014, and he's still one of the predominant storylines when it comes to professional wrestling and the WWE. He's one of the most discussed topics. He's one of the most talked about individuals. I thought more people would have actually voted for CM Punk versus the WWE because I could make a very strong statement for that as well. But the entertainment value of Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins was really there. I mean, you had all the history coming from their time being associated together with the Shield. You have so many different things about the way that this feud was done up until the big blow-off match. You know, you've got them having a pay-per-view match that really doesn't end up being a pay-per-view match, and the feud becomes so much more because of the fact it wasn't a traditional pay-per-view match, and I loved every minute of it. The problem with this feud, and the one thing I'll kind of knock it for a little bit, is that the two kind of big feature pay-per-view matches that did happen were kind of on the lame side, especially in terms of the finish and the payoff. So I don't know how satisfying of a feud that ultimately was. It was like it was all this good stuff in between, and then when you got to real pedal to the metal shit to get assholes to elbows time, it really didn't deliver all that much. So like I said, I was surprised. Maybe it's because you saw what happened with Daniel Bryan soon afterwards, the fact that Daniel Bryan hasn't been an active competitor for more than half a year now. I was surprised you guys didn't go with Daniel Bryan versus The Authority, and or go with CM Punk versus the WWE at your choice. But Ambrose and Rollins in general, I think, was a pretty good choice. I may have personally sided with the WWE Universe versus the WWE Network, because I think that's the ultimate feud of the year, because the fans have rebelled against that WWE Network. They have not gravitated to it. They have not accepted it. They have not latched onto it. And ultimately, not nearly enough of them have subscribed to it. To me, that's the ultimate feud, because that's the ultimate feud when it comes to the money in the old hashtag ass pocket for Vince McMahon and the WWE. But hey, that's just my opinion. So anyways, that was your choice for 2014 WWE Feud of the Year. Next up, I will reveal your choice for the biggest mistake by WWE in 2014. And you probably already know where that voting headed in a big way.